So next up we're going to have Rachel, who is our attorney-in-law here. And just so you know, Rachel in the past 45 days has actually won 5 different cases. So if you could just give her a round of applause. And that's very important for us because, like we said, a lot of these deal with our own activists that work here. So it's really great. And a lot of this time is spent in like pre-trial court appearances and things like that, and there's a lot of legal terminology that most of us don't know about that we kind of hear, but we don't necessarily know what it means. So, Rachel, I was hoping you could please explain the basics of different court issues and also when issues come up like this, how to file complaints against police officers who are arresting you or harassing you.
Sure. So Holly asked me to give sort of a basic breakdown of some terminology about the legal system that people might not know about, and some things that she mentioned were grand juries and subpoenas. So I'm going to briefly go over that, and then if anyone has any other things that they would like me to sort of break down, I would be happy to do that. So in San Diego, we have a grand jury, a criminal one and a civil one. The criminal grand jury is impaneled by the district attorney every month, and they basically have the ability to recommend charges against individual people for crimes. And the saying goes in law school, I'm sure we've all heard it, is that a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich in front of a grand jury because there is no defense. So it would be the prosecutor and these group of citizens going, seeing evidence, and then issuing charges against an individual. We also have a civil grand jury in San Diego that's supposed to investigate more public and government problems. So they're sort of a watchdog on what our government does, which is a good benefit. And also you can file police misconduct reports with them. So the grand jury is basically another way for an investigation to happen against you. In our normal day-to-day lives, right, we are trying to avoid arrest by direct interactions with the police. So you're just trying to walk down the street without, being too gay, otherwise you will get arrested, right? But there's also other ways that they can get you. They can do investigations, the grand jury can do an investigation. And then once they feel like they have enough probable cause to arrest, then that can happen as well. A subpoena is a court order that it issues when you are supposed to come in front of the court. So if you're ever issued a subpoena, like we saw today, go to court because they will get a warrant out for your arrest and charge you $10,000, as we saw against a domestic violence victim today. It's outrageous. So a subpoena is a court order to appear before the court. Are there any other terms? I'm sorry, I know that those are only 2 and Holly gave them to me. But basically the breakdown of, so let's say you get arrested, right? Okay, so first detained. So detained is different than arrested. When you're detained, the cops only need a reasonable suspicion to detain you, which means they just have to have more than just complete arbitrary reasons to stop and ask you a question. But in order to, and a detention really, they're not supposed to transport you anywhere, they're not supposed to do anything with you. It's supposed to just be a very quick interaction for them to assess certain information. And in California, we actually don't have a stop and identify law. So at that moment, you're not required to give your name. If you're driving, you have to have identification, and that's a separate issue. But if you're just walking down the street in California, you do not have to have identification. You don't have to give your name. However, it is a good idea because they can detain you even longer. And I wrote it in here, but the cops don't always follow the law, right? And they don't care. And if you're making their life more difficult, then they're going to make your life more difficult. And I'm sure if Nemo consents to talk about his experience, then you can ask him about that, so we know firsthand that happens. Beyond a detention, in order to arrest you, they need to have probable cause, which Literally, you learn in law school is pretty ridiculous. It could be that they were looking around too much. They weren't looking around at all. They were smiling. They weren't smiling enough, right? So it's just like whatever reason the cops have to like decide that like you're a target. But usually they need more, right? They need like a description or identification, or you were fleeing, you had a bag. But as we all know, and as we recognize as activists who are trying to actively work against the system of oppression that we have, that people of color, that the LGBT community, that there are vulnerable communities who are houseless people, youth, are stopped and targeted by the police because they're easy targets, and that probable cause probably doesn't exist, right? Other than like you're driving black, right? But we hear those kinds of like terminology of like that's what they're looking for, right? They what's the word? Stereotype, but it's racial profiling. Thank you.
Racial.
And so, but that's what they're supposed to have, but they don't always do it, right? We know that the system is fucked up, but that probable cause is what they need to have in order to arrest you. Once you are arrested, they take you to jail, they book you, and then somebody needs to post bond, or you can wait for an arraignment. So it's really messed up because our laws are set up so that people should be released without posting bail. So these like bail amounts that we hear, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, the law is like such that you're supposed to be let out on your own recognizance, which means if you're not a flight risk and if you're not a danger to your community, you should just be let out of jail and you're told what date you're supposed to come back, and that's supposed to be it. But because they keep you in jail until that day of your arraignment, so until you're brought before the court where the judge can make that determination, if you don't want to wait in jail 2, 3, 4 days, plus they don't count the weekends. So they can only hold you for 72 hours unless it's the weekend. So if you're brought in there Friday night, you can stay till Thursday. So you post the bond or the bail so you don't have to wait until the arraignment, and so that's just another fucked up part of our system. We're gonna edit out the video, right? So most people do post that bond to get out of jail, and then once that happens, you will wait for your arraignment, and that's the point at which you go before the judge. You're already out, so you don't have to make that determination to be let out on your own recognizance, but it's at that point where you either plead guilty or not guilty, and if you cannot afford an attorney, then the state or the county is supposed to appoint you one, but those can range. I've been up in Barstow where they don't even ask about your financial records. Just anyone who says that like they need the attorney who can't afford it is given one, versus in San Diego, if you're making, $24,000, then you do not get a defense attorney, right? So, and that's outrageous. Many of us make around that much. So it's like, can you imagine affording an attorney? No. So, and then that's the arraignment, and then pretty much what happens is that there's a series of pretrial hearings that will happen before your trial. I'm sure other people can help me with the statistic, like 98% of cases don't go to trial. They get what's called a plea bargain. So where the district attorney, in the interest of time and efficiency and resources of their own department, will try to like drop the charges. Usually it's like ridiculous and not good enough. For Ophelia, they were willing to drop like failure to yield but not resisting an officer. They would not refuse. They said no, when she gets arrested or when she gets pulled over again, I want the cops to know that this is on her record and what she did before, right? So they can be real assholes. In which case it's really important to fight and to go to trial and to make sure that they're held accountable, because everyone is allowed a jury trial if you're faced with jail time, and that jury trial is something that we can use to our advantage, and ask me about jury nullification later.
Okay. You want to pause this on?
Oh yes, sorry, thank you. I'm out of time though, right? Yes. Okay, cool. So what we have here are police misconduct forms. I'm going to pass them out. I want everybody to read them. I want you to think about what is in here and what information you should be thinking about if you're ever in front of the police, because this is the information that you'll fill out after the fact, and this is what's going to hold them accountable later on. So please take one and pass it.